Hi everybody, it's H.M. Jones. Some of you know me as Hannah. I am going to read one of my short stories and post it on my YouTube channel so that if you wanted to listen to something while you walked or whatever you wanted to do while you sat, while you sewed, while you cooked or whatever, this short story is from the Magic Unveiled anthology. Some of you probably have this. If you haven't, it's my favorite thing to write short stories. So I do write novels. Many of you probably know me best from Monochrome, which was my award winner. And I am proud of that book, but my heart often kind of gravitates toward writing short stories. And so I thought I would read my short story from this anthology, which came out a few years ago. And it has a lot of great authors in it too. So mine's on first, so it's easy to find. It's called Gypsum Jane's Inkscapes, and here it goes. So hope you enjoy. Gypsum Jane's Inkscapes by H.M. Jones. Justin meandered the nearly deserted streets of Portland in a stupor. It wasn't a drunken stupor like that guy across the street falling over his own feet, nor was it a pot stupor like those teens he passed near the gas station across from the tent city in Chinatown, who were scarfing gas station tacos like they were manna from heaven. It was more of a what the hell is life and what happens after death kind of stupor. An existential stupor. He'd never given it much thought until recently, but now it was all he could think of. He thought of it when trying to sleep, when barely eating, when driving to work, even when tattooing clients. Some might think concentration important when creating permanent art on another person's skin, but he found that his hands were on autopilot when tattooing anymore. His brain didn't need to be truly present, only absently aware. So yes, he even thought about life and death and meaning when at work. The thoughts, the fears were worse today, after laying his mom to rest in a huge cemetery outside the city limits. A staunch atheist his entire life, he wondered why he was obsessing over it. Mama's dead, and dead's dead. There's nothing else now. No mom after death. But that thought felt so cold, so hollow, that he wanted to believe in anything else. God, ghosts, Mount Olympus, to get him past the gut-wrenching ache her presence used to fill. His mom was his best friend. That might have sounded lame, but there it was. She was always there for him, his plus one at any number of metal or rock concerts, or a warm hug and baked goods when life sucked. There was a huge void her big personality, blue hair, and numerous tattoos once occupied, which is why he found himself getting lost in his thoughts in the streets of Portland, trying to locate a tattoo parlor still open to marry his grief to art and pain. The trouble with his grand plan to fill a portion of his skin with something that represented Mom was that most of the tattoo parlors in Portland closed at 10 p.m. The ones that didn't were booked or not up to his standards. He was a bit of a snob in that way. He was careful in his health standards, in his art, in the way his artists conducted themselves around clients. He expected the same from places he visited. So it was becoming a futile search, this inky memorial to his mother. Now, after witnessing the joy with which the kids at the gas station demolished their tacos, he realized he was hungry. Not hungry enough for gas station tacos, though that was one of the only places open around 1 a.m., but very hungry all the same. He hadn't eaten the food at the memorial service for Mom. Come to think of it, he hadn't really eaten in 2 days. He'd had coffee, a few glasses of his best scotch and Gatorade the next morning, but no sustenance. His feet ached from walking non-stop since 4 p.m. After the memorial services, he told his aunt he was going for a short walk and had ended up in downtown Portland hours later. His stomach felt clenched and hollow. He walked another block before passing a dirty movie theater and planting himself in the ever-present line under the glowing pink Voodoo Donut sign. A messy, super sugary, candy-coated slab of dense dough was just what he needed. The drunk gaggle of 2 young girls in front of him kept whispering and looking out of the corner of their eyes at him. They tossed their hair, trying to catch his attention. He turned his face from the group, not wanting to talk to them or encourage an encounter of any sort. He stared fixedly down the alley in between the donut shop and a closed restaurant in order to appear busily distracted. However, he soon didn't have to feign distraction. Something glowed at the end of the alley. It was a flickering, ancient glow, dim and beckoning. It sent shivers up his arm. He was sure he was seeing the birth of an apparition. He shook the silly idea from his too hungry brain. Lack of sustenance caught up to him. He blinked slowly and stared down the alley again, but the light didn't waver, which led him to believe he was looking at... He squinted. A lantern? Weird. Would the city approve a lantern? Seems like a fire hazard. He was transfixed by the light. When the line moved inside, he still ruminated over it, in a daze. He picked a donut without thought, without noticing the girls ahead of him taking selfies with him, and the garish donut shop as the background. He pushed through the drunk and high crowd as if in a dream, out of the stained glass doors of the shop, and down the alley toward the light. Then it was before him, an old-fashioned black iron lantern sending shadows dancing across the cobbled pavement outside the storefront. No, not a store. A tattoo parlor. An open tattoo parlor. Gypsum Jane's Inkscapes was splashed in loopy script across a rough slab of wood hanging from iron hinges above a heavy oak door. A woodcut of a tattoo gun surrounded in inky flowers and leaves was stamped next to the gilded shop name. On the door hung a painted "Open" sign, slung over an ornate black knob. It was classy and old-world. He was immediately enamored. Whoever owned this shop had taste. He turned the knob and entered a world of fantasy. The interior of Gypsum Jane's was less like a traditional tattoo shop and more like a Romany wagon. The walls were a waxed cherry wood on bottom with an elegant dark green wallpaper on top. Gold leaf designs ran up and down the wallpaper. Half of the shop, probably where the owner kept the supplies and drawing table, was closed off with velvet curtains. A very expensive-looking carved chair with gold velvet cushions occupied the middle of the room. It was the most elaborate tattooing chair he'd ever seen. An iron lever stuck out from the side, probably for reclining. A sturdy stool with a leather top sat just next to the reclining chair, and a beautiful wooden tea table with a marble top sat just in front of the stool. There were a few shelves in the shop, built into the wall in the same shiny wood that the walls and trim were made from. The shelves had carved embellishments on each corner in the shape of flowering plants. A shelf to the right held an assortment of teacups, saucers, spoons, and canisters. The teacups looked very familiar. Justin searched the room for its owner before stepping toward the shelf and peering at the delicate hanging cups. His mouth fell open. Mom. He breathed the word like a prayer. Never was a mom, a little too wild for that sort of life. But I'm guessing you weren't addressing me. Justin turned quickly to face the woman who owned the silky, teasing voice. What he saw left him speechless. The woman he faced was about his age, had dark, straight hair, bright almond eyes, and perfectly glowing skin. She wore a loose, gauzy skirt sitting low on her waist. One of her tan legs peeked out from a slit in the gauze. She was intoxicating. He tried not to stare. She wore a simple modern tank tucked into the skirt. The cotton seemed out of place next to the velvets, gauze, and silks decorating her shop and her legs. Her bare arms were snaked in the most beautifully detailed vines of flowers he'd ever seen. The shading, vibrant colors, the use of contrast, made it look as though the vines were swinging in the breeze every time she moved her arms. Justin caught himself wondering if they actually were moving. Well, aren't you charming, standing there with your mouth wide open and frosting on your upper lip? She chuckled when he shut his mouth, and with a click and sheepishly ran his hand across his face. The beautiful woman made him feel like he was a 7-year-old, caught up past bedtime, snatching sweets from the cookie jar. Oh, I was just looking at your teacups. Sorry. Well... Damn it, Justin, pull it together. They were painted by your mother, right? Justin's voice had ceased to work. It was official. He'd gone from 7 to infant in only seconds. He nodded, a confused frown stuck to his face. You're probably wondering how I know she was your mom? The beautiful woman winked at him, and he felt his throat close up. You look exactly like her, only male and much taller. The eyes especially. You have lovely eyes, the same blue. Same curiosity and focus. The woman sauntered over to him and stuck out a petite hand. The name's Gypsum Jane, but you can call me Jane. Justin regained enough of his senses to take her small hand in his large palm. Justin. Yes, your mother mentioned you. She gestured toward the teacup with a nod of her head. She was a true artist. The flowers she painted on this set were specially designed for me. If you look closely, you can see they aren't actually flowers at all. They're bladed rosettes of gypsum. Justin turned back to the teacups and picked one up, cupping it delicately in his large hand. The rose-colored strokes were airy and light. She'd splashed the edges with a darker shade of rose and done some gold flake work on the bottom of the cup. He turned the cup over and saw her familiar loose and fast LF there. Laura does beautiful work. She tells me you do, too, but, like me, your canvas is skin. Your canvas is skin, rather. Justin replaced his mother's hand-painted cup reluctantly. It felt like he was hanging her up, putting her away. Yes, she did do beautiful work. I own a shop in Washington, but I've been with my mom for the last 2 weeks, helping her feel comfortable. She passed away 3 days ago. The funeral was today, but we've been planning for her since she was diagnosed. Cancer. So sad. So she said, you must be feeling very lost right now. Jane's voice was soft, empathetic, but not sad. Yeah, that's actually the perfect description of how I feel. Justin felt like thanking her. Most people said the wrong thing, but she'd pinpointed how it felt to lose his mom, like he was lost to the world too. I actually have been wandering around Portland for hours now. I was trying to find a place to get some ink or, to honor her. Did you buy these from her at the farmer's market when she was still well? Justin was having a hard time containing his excitement, and his voice carried it. He was speaking to a woman who knew his mom, who appreciated her as an artist. And he just happened into her shop. He'd never before believed in fate, but this was either fate or an impossible coincidence. The woman smiled a little. Oh no, I didn't buy them. They're more like a barter. Her art for my art. Justin smiled then, too. Oh, I see. I didn't realize she'd had any skin left that wasn't tattooed. Did you get a picture of what you tattooed on her? I'd love to see it. Jane motioned that he should follow her, and he very willingly did. She waltzed over to the intricate chair and gestured that he should sit. He sat down heavily, his mind spinning and dazed. She sat next to him upon a sturdy stool, opened an elaborately painted cabinet, and started placing little inkwells filled with ink on her marble tea table. The payment was not for her own tattoo, but for yours. I have an opening once every century, so you're a very lucky man your mother prepaid. Her eyes shone mischievously as she smiled. Yeah, I'm booked out pretty far in advance, too. That's how it goes when you're good at what you do. Jane then replied as if she were withholding a secret. Justin cleared his throat and tried to shake the daze from his head. He felt as if he was talking and moving through a fog. He had so many questions, but they kept falling away from him. Mom never told me she paid for a tattoo. Must have slipped her mind when she was so sick. I just happened upon this shop. It seems impossible, but here I am. It's crazy, huh? It seems entirely possible to me, and here you are. So I must fulfill my end of the bargain. The woman brought out a bronze gun to which she affixed a golden needle. If his mind hadn't been so flighty and out of reach, he would have asked her about the strange setup. It certainly doesn't meet the codes I follow. They can't be different in Oregon. The thought that he should refuse to be tattooed by Jane, however, never remotely occurred to him. Jane removed a blue silk kerchief from the band of her skirt. She turned his arm over, revealing a bare patch of skin on his inner forearm. She uncapped a jade bottle and tipped the most beautiful-smelling liquid into his skin. The scent drifted past his consciousness. It smelled like pine trees on winter nights, scotch on the rocks, the sunset over Puget Sound. She ran a gilded straight edge over the hair on his arm, and it seemed to melt away. 2 tips more of the heavenly liquid, this time smelling of Mom's caramel black tea, chocolate-chipped scones and fluffy hand-whipped cream, and wiped her slate clean with the blue silk kerchief. I never told you what I wanted tattooed. Justin tried to remember what it was that he wanted. Had he even come up with anything? An overdone mom banner across his heart? But that seemed too flaccid a monument to a woman like his mother. She told me. Justin felt warm tears fall from his eyes, but he could not lift his leaden arms to wipe them away. His head was so heavy with the scent of his mom's memories from the damned jade bottle. Gypsum Jane bent over his arm. Her tattoo gun sounded like the buzz of a hummingbird's wings, high and light. The golden needle dipped in and out of his skin, but he felt no stinging pain, only a slight tapping upon his skin, as if he were detached from his nerves, muscles, and body. Indeed, he felt as though he were floating around his body, watching the tattooing from the outside. There was something wrong. Wrong with his brain, with this wagon or tattoo parlor. No, it was a wagon. He could feel the bumping jolt of its motion. Through the circular window on the door, downtown Portland sped away from them. As Jane tattooed, Justin's body sat glued to the table. His eyes darted from the moving scenery, now hunter greens and sky blues, to Jane's small hand clutching the brassy gun. His stomach dipped and his head spun. He was at first inside his body, then outside, looking down. It was as if it was so unsettling he thought he might vomit, if only he could stay inside his own body long enough to perform the action. Are we moving? I'm not feeling right. My body is here, isn't it? And am I in my body? He wasn't sure if he thought the questions or said them. Did my mouth move? Forming ideas into words was much harder than it was when he had first entered the shop. Just relax, Justin. It's not easy on a mortal body to travel between realms. It's all right to feel nauseous and lightheaded. You will sometimes feel as though you are apart from your body. That's all right. You don't need the body to travel here. It's actually quite burdensome. Feel free to leave it whenever you wish. You'll need to leave it in the shop when we leave, at least. When we stop, at least. Gypsum Jane didn't look up from his arm as she answered his question. Her concentration was unruffled even with the swaying of the tattoo wagon. His stomach churned violently. He knew if he stayed in his body, he would vomit, so he fled from it. He stood back from the chair where Gypsum Jane continued to tattoo him, away from his body, his eyes wide open and staring as if he were dead. Wait, is my body dead when I leave it? Does it stop working without me? I don't want to die. He made a jump back to his body, even though it was harder to function inside of it than in his strange, ethereal existence. She looked up from her work then for a moment to smile at him. She looked directly at him, who was not corporeal, so he must have had some visible shape. Or she's just magic? Is that the right word? She resumed tattooing, but answered in a distracted murmur. I'm keeping your body grounded. It is alive, functioning well enough to keep you going for a short time without. When we come to a stop, I will continue to do my work here. I must, to keep your body firmly in the mortal realm. You, however, will open the door and leave me and your body here. But only for a short time. You must return before I finish the tattoo. The wagon parlor lurched to a halt, and Justin wondered as his body shook with the jolt. And Justin watched as his body shook with the jolt, and he was unaffected by it. Where am I going? How long do I have before you're done with the tattoo? What will happen if I don't make it back? Fear wavered distantly inside his non-corporeal form. He wondered if his non-form was feeling the fear less subtly because he had no racing heart or clenching stomach, or if he felt distant because his body was feeling it and he was receiving only an echo. He saw the corner of Jane's lips pull up in a sly smile. You won't be alone. You will make it back on time. We've stopped. Get going. She's waiting for you. So, a little reluctantly, Justin walked past his staring shell, his eyes lingering on Gypsum Jane's shiny coal-black tresses, and out of the sturdy, iron-hinged door of the wagon shop. He stepped onto sparkling white cobblestone path. The sun shone brightly in a baby-blue sky dotted with fluffy cotton ball clouds. Vibrant green grass reached knee-high and around the cobbled path. Wildflowers in every possible color peeked out from tall stalks of sturdy grass. Striped lemon and black bees sat on open blossoms. Teal butterflies fluttered over gently rustling bubblegum pink buds on graceful cherry trees. The trees surrounded a cozy little cottage, ahead to the right. The cobbles led directly to the abode. The wild grass and flowers were tall enough to make traveling anywhere else laborious, so Justin figured he was meant to visit there. As he got closer to the cob and thatch cottage, Justin felt a tug of familiarity. It was surrounded by a low gray stone wall, open to allow the cobbled path to continue up to the heavy oak door of the English-style dwelling. Innumerable flowers and plants flanked the cottage on either side, too many for Justin, not a gardener himself, to name. But he recognized some. In the sunniest part in the yard, to the right of the cottage, sat happy tea plants. Jasmine climbed up the front of the house on a white trellis. A round rose garden with a stone bench took up most of the front yard. He spied an area in the very back of the yard where a busy beehive hummed next to a raised garden bed filled with herbs. He knew some of the herbs and plants, even at a distance, because his mom was an avid gardener who liked to make her own teas. And she was good at it. She used to sell her brews online, to local shops and at farmers' markets. She had a steady stream of customers willing to pay for them, along with her hand-painted teacups. The familiar sensation crept back into his awareness. He focused on a simple hand-painted sign hanging from the middle of a wooden trellis over the break in the stone wall. A stack of elegantly brushed teacups leaned precariously to the right, looking ready to topple with the slightest breeze. The sign was the exact replica of a tattoo his mom had on her right calf. The words next to the sign sent chills up his absent spine. Stacked tea shop. He was inside his mother's dream. Her online shop was named Stack Tea Shop, but she'd always wanted to turn into an actual store and serving parlor. He didn't like to think of himself as a gliding, wispy spirit, so he chose to see himself as firm and in control of his existence, which was ridiculous, of course, since he was neither. Either way, he still managed to knock on the solid door of the cottage his mother envisioned setting up her entire life. Finances made it impossible. Reality made it impossible. But here, wherever here was, it was possible. Did that mean? Before he could ask the question that filled him with the longing and hope, his mother flung open the heavy wooden door with skinny tattooed arms, then threw them around his neck in a fierce embrace. He guessed that they both must have had some form because he felt her warmth as if it were real. Her hands were slightly chilled against his back, as they always were. "Any time of the year, I can hold a warm cup in my hands without being too hot. That's a great comfort, you know," she once told him when he teased her about her chilled hands. The smell of eucalyptus and patchouli encompassed him. It was embedded into the corners of her overlarge white sweater. The sweater Grandma had made for her the year before Grandma died. She'd spent her bed rest knitting items her children would remember her by. Justin remembered thinking that he'd never be that selfless, but now he knew differently. As he lifted his short mom up in a huge hug and buried his face in her essential oil-scented shoulder, he knew Grandma did just the right thing before she left the world. "Mom! Your shop! Your garden!" He put her back to her feet, though he held her shoulders and stared at her in awe. You're... But he didn't know what to say. He was going to say alive, but no. He knew that wasn't true. She was gone from his world. In true mom fashion, however, she just flipped her lilac and rose-colored hair over to one side and gushed at him. He gaped at her, taking in her signature half-buzzed, two-tone hair, her nose diamond stud, bright pink lips, dark purple skinny jeans, dwarfing sweater, and her multitudinous tea tattoos, as if he were drinking in life. She looked younger than he remembered, no wrinkles, glowing skin, and a youthful firmness. But she looked like her, all the same. Throughout his childhood, people stared at her, whispered that a grown woman ought to know better than look like that. He never understood what people meant. She looked like a dream, bold, bright, and vibrant. A walking piece of art. Could grown-ups not look the way that best suited their personalities? Was it childlike to be comfortable with yourself? "My boy, Gypsum is a miracle. She found you just like she said she would. Life is bliss, but this..." Her eyes grew watery. "This completes my joy. Come in, come in." She rolled her hand around, waving him in her little cottage. He followed, feeling very much a mama's boy, in love with the sight of her more than any of the little pleasantries that filled his eyes. And there were many pleasant things to love about Mom's little shop. Herbs and dried flowers hung from the exposed rafters in the quaint white cottage. A light slab island was covered in drying berries. A great dark wood cabinet was filled to the brim with hand-painted teacups in Mom's signature style. Tea leaves in various states of preparation lay scattered about the wooden countertops. The floor creaked pleasantly underfoot, and the air was a mixture of spices, flowers, and something sweet. He stared wide-eyed, trying to take it all in via his peripheral vision while still keeping one eye on his mother at all times, afraid she might disappear if he didn't. She gestured that he should sit down on a sturdy wooden chair decorated by a simple floral cushion. He did so while continuing to stare at her back as she took a steaming teapot from an old-fashioned iron stove and poured hot water into a pot decorated in a delicately brushed lavender stalk. She set the table in her familiar way, putting the steaming teapot down first upon an iron hot plate. She hummed Bridge Over Troubled Waters while it steeped. She set some matching lavender teacups on the table, a sugar bowl, and a lipped cream container, all painted in her soft strokes. When she finally sat, her eyes were brimming with tears. "Mom, what is this place? Is it a dream? Are you living your dream? I mean, it's just like you said, with a tea garden and the little cottage." His mom's eyes flashed. "I suppose it is my dream, yeah. But it's what's real for me now. This is where I am. You don't have long here, honey, so I can't explain it all. Not that I could explain it even if we had hours together." She waved a skinny tattooed hand. "But I knew you'd be down. I knew you'd be worried. You always were such a concrete thinker. I mean, as a kid, you questioned the Ghostbusters, for crying out loud." She chortled and snorted her ridiculous laugh, and Justin joined in. He couldn't help but laugh along to such a silly sound. "Well, the ghosts on Ghostbusters were pretty unrealistic, Mom. Slimer, I mean, come on." He laughed as her lips pulled up in a knowing smile. "I'll give you that." She poured him a cup of tea that smelled a little of caramel. She put 2 sugar lumps and a shot of cream in his cup and stirred it with a dainty spoon. It was as if their little morning rituals had never been interrupted by chemo and hospice. "Like I said, we don't have much time. I just wanted you to see, because you're the type that needs to see. You can't stay for long. That's not how this works. Your body needs you back as soon, or you'll be stuck." Justin took a sip of tea, which was neither scalding nor warm, but that perfect in-between. It was a little sweet, a little bold, and a little creamy. It had the perfect touch of silky caramel and nutty almond behind it. It was the best cup of tea he'd ever tasted. He sighed and took a second sip, even though time was precious. He couldn't help it. He knew he'd never have anything this good again. Not in his lifetime, at least. He set the cup down reluctantly. Would it be so bad if I just stayed? It would be. It's not your time, and I don't know what your after will be like. This is mine. You won't stay here unless that's what's meant for you. This is what's meant for me. That doesn't mean I don't get visitors. I had a nice chat with Grandma Ivy last week. Gave her some of her favorite herbal tea, lavender and peppermint, to take back to her place with Papa Dan on the shore. Their beach house. They live in their beach house there. Justin felt a deep tug inside him. The tug might have had something to do with the hollow piece his grandma, Papa, and Mother left behind becoming full again, or it might have had to do with his body calling him back. His mother's face fell a moment, as if she too felt the pull. "You have to go, baby. This is not your place. I don't know what your place will be I don't know what your place will be or when it will come. I just wanted you to have some hope. You were always so cynical." She reached her hand out to cup his face, which didn't feel as solid as it once had. "I miss you, Mama." His voice broke as his spirit started fading. He felt the deep ache return to the pit of his stomach, and a sharp pang of grief stab his chest. "Oh, that life there is just a little bump in the road. Bent, not broken, my boy. Like I've always said, you won't have to miss me for long." He was whisked away so quickly that he didn't see the cottage fade, or the quick stab of reluctance sitting in his mother's sky-blue eyes. When he opened his eyes, his mother's perfection was gone. All was gloomy darkness. He made to grip the edges of Gypsum Jane's ornate tattooing chair, but was stunned when they met the mucky, slick stones of one of Portland's dodgy alleys. He pushed himself off the grimy ground and turned around, wanting more, needing to ask Gypsum if it had been real, if his mother was truly beyond, not gone. He yearned for confirmation that he was not going insane with grief, which was the more logical conclusion. His eyes met a heavy door under an iron lantern, but an electric bulb burned within. The writing on the window front was painted to look old-fashioned, but it was recently done. It read, Old World Treasures. He pushed his face to the window and saw the bare outlines of old furniture and creepy-eyed, glass-eyed dolls with heavy curls and polished silver. An antique shop? And not at all like Gypsum's place. He turned from the window in dismay. The moon was high and bright, bright enough to reveal the truth behind the mysterious tattoo shop. A dream. Somehow he'd fallen asleep. It made sense. He was mentally, emotionally, and physically exhausted. Grief sat so heavy on his body that the simple act of walking took a great toll. And he'd been walking for hours. He'd worn himself out. Finally. It made sense. But he wished it didn't. Mom believed in something bigger. He knew that that's where the dream stemmed from. He didn't believe in the spiritual, the paranormal, the beyond. But she did, and somewhere deep down, he wanted to believe she was right. Because it would be comfortable. It would be beautiful. It would bring him peace. But it was a lie. He rubbed his weary face and felt tears build behind his raw, red eyes. He'd already cried so much today that the moisture was painful and throbbing. He wiped the tears away with an impatient hand and rubbed them on his jeans, accidentally brushing his forearm against the harsh material as well. Ow! What the... He was so startled by the burning pain on his forearm that he immediately looked for the source of it. Had he scuffed his arm when he passed out from exhaustion? Had he injured himself unknowingly? He turned his forearm over and gasped. Shaking his head in disbelief, he rushed to put his arm under the low light of the electric lantern to better see the dark lines and bold new ink of his fresh tattoo. It was a tower of 4 teacups painted in Mom's fine hand. Each housed a different flower, a rose, a carnation, a dahlia, and a sprig of lavender. The tower of teacups leaned to the side as if someone had tipped them. Under the precarious but beautiful stack, a familiar saying was inked in loopy letters. Bent, not broken. The smell of caramel and freshly brewed tea leaves wafted through the air. Justin swore he could hear the sound of wooden carriage wheels against cobbles, but then he lifted his head to find the source of the smell and sound, and he was only met with the neon pink glow of Voodoo Donut sign and the aroma of sugar. Yeast and urine. It was the smell of a Portland alley. He looked down at his arm again, sure the tattoo would not be there, sure his mind had left him in the flood of grief that consumed his days. But there it was, the tilted teacups and Mom's motto, artfully ingrained into the skin of his arm. He walked back to the main street and hailed a cab, a light and unfamiliar sensation tugging at his heart. Hope. This is what hope feels like. And that is Gypsum Jane's Inkscapes. And I believe it was published in, let me look real quick. I want to say 2016. But it's under my copyright now. Yep, 2016. By Creative Alchemy, which is one of the publishers I quite often work with. And it's one of my favorite short stories because it's about hope and about how consuming loss and grief can feel. And I know that's something that many of you might be feeling now. And so I want you to remember that we sometimes can be bent but not broken, and that there's so much hope in the unknown and in this world. So I hope you have a nice day. Bye.